Hello and welcome back. It's Jason again. We're going to watch part 2 of Steven's video. So if you haven't seen part 1 yet, go ahead and click on the link in the description, or if you're on Udemy, go ahead and click back in the course. Part 1 was the first 2 sections of Steven's video, which is the funnel and the Facebook. So it was all about building a community and attracting members and things like that. So this video will be the last 3 sections, building the website, setting up the QR code, and Steven's thoughts on scaling this project up. So let's go ahead and switch scenes here and put this in full screen and let's watch.
I wanted the website to be clean and to the point. To get the right look and feel, I used Bootstrap, a collection of CSS rules and user interface conventions for building mobile-friendly websites.
I'm going to pause there. So Steven mentions Bootstrap. If you don't know, Bootstrap is it's a web building framework originally created by Twitter, but it was so useful that they released it open source. They called it Bootstrap, and now it's like one of the most popular front end frameworks in the world. So let's go ahead and pull up their site, and I'll show you a couple of examples. Okay, and the website is getbootstrap.com, and the current version is 4.4. I'll show you some examples. You might recognize some of these. It's a quick way to get started with a blog or one of these pages with the Jumbotron. This is a pretty popular setup. So you have a big thing up here with some text and some things down here and a nav bar. Whenever you see nav bars that look like this, it's most likely Bootstrap. You can still customize everything and change all the colors, but this provides us a starting point, which is nice. Here's a typical blog. And there's a popular one I see on the website all the time is this carousel. Looks like this, and you can imagine different background images here, and you can click forward. So this is what Bootstrap looks like. I'll even show some of the documentation. So most things are in components. They have like nifty little cards that you can reuse. So Steven's website uses these cards. I don't think he's using an image, but they can have a title, a body, and a footer, and things like that. So the idea is Bootstrap is based on something called responsive design. So whenever you resize windows, everything rearranges in sort of like a proper way. So if you look at it on, let's go ahead and check out the nav bar here. So if you resize things, eventually they'll change to like a mobile view or something like that. Or if you're on a bigger high resolution monitor, then it'll do the appropriate thing so that it customizes itself automatically to look good whether you're on mobile or tablet or desktop. Anyways, we'll play around with some Bootstrap a little bit later in this video. So right now, let's go ahead and continue on.
I designed 2 calls to action, one short, the other long. The shorter call to action just says, please click below to join the group. The longer one is a personal message. It explains that I'm a member of the community and that I'm trying to help connect people. I mentioned that I'm a coder and I have a PhD. This is not to brag. It's intended to communicate that this is a group of educated people capable of building real solutions. Then I put my code on GitHub so that others can use it if they want to. You'll notice that the code is written in a high-level language, but it compiles to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I configured...
So Steven mentions compiling to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That's called metacoding or meta writing, which Steven talks about in one of his earlier episodes, but it just means like writing code that writes other code. In this case, the high-level language he's talking about is Racket, and it generates HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code, which is pretty cool because you can focus just writing in one language and it writes out in 3 separate languages for you. For those that don't know, GitHub it's a place where you can store repositories of code. Users can contribute to the same repo, and it helps manage like code conflicts, and you can create separate branches and things like that. But every coder is pretty familiar with GitHub. And when you're working on large projects, it's kind of essential. Anyways, let's go ahead and continue this video.
GitHub to serve the code, and it saves me time because I don't have to host the site myself. With the website online, I could have immediately generated a QR code and put it onto a flyer. But the URL for this site is a bit long, so first I shortened it with a popular URL shortening service called Bitly. The shorter the URL, the less complex the QR code, which means it can be scanned from further away. And it means scans will be more reliable. I don't want someone to have to scan twice, otherwise they might give up and drop out of the value funnel on this very first stage. I wanted the flyer to take up half a page, so that it would be large enough to see from far away, but small enough to be postable in many different places. You may notice that I included the bit.ly URL beneath the QR.
We're going to stop here and do a little activity. I'm going to actually scan this code, and I'll also open it up on in a browser. Part of this is cut off, so I'm going to rewind just slightly. Maybe that would be good. So let's go ahead and open it up in a browser first. So there's my browser window. Make it smaller. So we have https://bit.ly/39gmsay. There's our page, and let's go ahead and try the QR. So I'm just going to open up my camera app on my phone. Most phones now come with a built-in QR scanner, usually built right into the camera app. For Android, I just hover the phone over the QR for a second, and then it pops up a little link. There we go. Let me go ahead and switch views here. So you can see I'm using the camera app, and I scan the QR, and the little icon down there shows up. Let me go ahead and click on that, and it says view website, so I can go ahead and view. And there it is, and this is the Bootstrap mobile view. So you can see how the cards rearrange themselves, and they still look nice. There's still nice padding between the cards, and I can scroll with my finger. Looks great. And if I wanted to switch it to this view, oops, still looks good. And then here is the desktop view. And if I go ahead and shrink this, you'll see all the text shrinks with it. And then if I make it too big, it doesn't use the entire width. And that's because, we don't want, each line would end up way too long, and it wouldn't really look good. And all these cards would end up super skinny and super wide. So we're going to play around with this and experiment with some Bootstrap classes. So right now I'm going to right click and inspect the page here. And you can see the code for it. We have your typical HTML and your header, and the head will include Bootstrap CSS and JavaScript that's needed to use all these different modular classes and things like that. So let's go ahead and skip down. Instead of finding something, I can go ahead and inspect right here. Here's the card. Here's where the text that says long version. If you're new to the inspector, I can make changes here, and so I can change long version, and I can write card header, because that's what this is. And so it looks like I'm making changes to the website, but all these changes are only local. If I hit refresh, all the changes will get reset because it's not actually sending them out. So I can play around with it. In fact, this is actually how I prototype sites. So before I write the code, I want to see like a different style. I'll just inspect it and modify the style directly. So let's go ahead and modify the style of this card. And there's a couple of that I know already. I can type BG primary, and that will set the background to the primary color. And the Bootstrap default primary color is this blue. I can also see it, and there's my blue card. I can also change it to secondary, and I think there's also warning. This is actually kind of a fun color, but I'm going to choose a dark color like primary. There's another one we could use called text white. We can also try text warning. Now all I'm doing is adding to the class, and that's kind of what Bootstrap uses. It has all these built-in classes so that we can just chain together all the different classes that we want, and it will, it'll apply whatever is specific to that class as best it can. So in this case, I have the whole card has BG primary and text warning. But if I wanted the header to be something different, now since the header is inside the card, if I set something here, it's going to override whatever the card has. So if I want the top to be BG secondary, it'll look like that. So the other thing I wanted to show you was these columns. Now, if I wanted, I can go over to the card here. Oh, this is the card. I can add, actually, let's go to the short version since that has less things. So there's margins like M. I can do M1. So that added a little bit more margin. Let me try something a little bit more drastic. M5, margin 5. So it has a set margin, and the actual number of pixels will depend on your device, on your screen. So these are kind of standardized sizes. So we have M5 for margin. What's nice here is I can do ML5, and that's only just going to set the left margin. Same thing, I can do MR5, or what about MB5? That's only going to set the bottom margin. There's a neat one called MY5, and that will set the bottom margin and the top margin. I can also chain together other classes like ML5, and so now I have top and bottom and left, but not the right. And I can also set padding like P5. That means the inside, now this looks a little weird, basically the inside begins after that amount of padding, right? So, and I can use the same commands, like PX5 or something like that. That will only set padding on the left and right. So that's how you set padding. The other thing we have here, let me go ahead and turn off these things. Enter. We also have these column sizes. Now, this container goes from here to here, and the default column size is 12 or 12 columns. If I want this card to take the space of 6 of those columns, I can do column 6. So this is a column 6, and there's room for another column 6 right here. So this is column 6, and it's left aligned. If I want it to be centered, I can do MX Auto, which means automatically set the margins so that it's centered. It has some weird padding in it that's already, I guess, the default. So I'm going to do P0, get rid of that padding. I can change the text alignment. I can do text center. Cool, now all the text is center. Maybe I want this text to be left, so I can do text left just for that one. Yeah, I'll show you what happens when I do column 1. Let's go. I can do column 8. Basically, 1 all the way through 12. There's another feature we have. We can say I only want it to do column 6 when the window size is about medium or higher. That's what that means. So I am at medium or higher. So if I open this up, it's using a column 6. Now, once I get to something smaller than medium, like this is, now I'm at the small sized view. It uses, by default, it uses the whole span. That's called the Bootstrap grid system. And there's a bunch of other features you can do to align these things. But the idea is you set columns, you set them with values between 1 and 12. And the idea is it will look good on a phone or on a desktop display. I can't show this on my phone because remember, these changes are local only. And I don't know if I have an inspector in the phone's browser. That is my quick Bootstrap demo. You can try this if you followed along. All I did was inspect the page. I've found the different classes, and I just added to these class names, right? And if you want to look up more classes, you can go and search the documentation on Bootstrap. There's a little bit more to this video, so let's go ahead and continue it and see what else Steven has to say.
Included the bit.ly URL beneath the QR code so that people who do not have QR code scanners will still be able to follow the link. I haven't posted these yet, but I've scheduled this for tomorrow. By the way, some of you may have noticed that I could have linked directly from the paper to the Facebook group, thus shortening the funnel. I considered that, but I opted for the longer funnel instead. My homework assignment to students out there would be, what would you choose? Do a cost-benefit analysis on paper. Try to figure out why I chose what I did. What options do you think are open to me in my design that wouldn't be otherwise?
So Steven gave us an assignment there, and I'm going to give you my thoughts. But if you were to do this, go ahead and jot down your thoughts. So Steven's asking why he used a bit.ly link to his GitHub site rather than just directly to the Facebook group. And he mentioned, doing a cost-benefit analysis. Now, the obvious cost is, well, it takes more time to develop the GitHub site, to write the Racket code and deploy the site. All that costs more time and more development and more work, right? As opposed to just directing straight to Facebook. Now, the benefit to me would be I wouldn't have been able to do that Bootstrap activity if Steven didn't make that GitHub site. I mean, I could modify Facebook. I don't think it uses Bootstrap. It uses its own framework. But Facebook is very limited. If we build our own site in GitHub, then we can actually change that site. Now, the QR code won't change. But if we wanted, we can modify and customize that site so it can have other resources, maybe even resources for people that are not on Facebook. And yes, they do exist. It would be good to have these options. Now, if we went straight to Facebook, we wouldn't be able to create those options. Someone would scan the code, it would go straight to Facebook, and they might just stop and say, oh, well, I don't use Facebook, so I'm not going to bother. But if it went to a site, it could have like direct links to resources. It would still have the, hey, join us on Facebook, and because the goal is to funnel us into that Facebook group, but it could also have another forum that anyone can use where you don't have to be on Facebook to use it. So those are my thoughts. You can do your own cost-benefit analysis. So right now, we're just going to watch the rest of this video and see what else Steven has to say.
In closing, I want to say that I'm excited for tomorrow morning. In times like these, I believe that if you can do anything to make the world even slightly better, you should. The greater your coding fluency, the more able you will be to take those small increases in value and to scale them up. And that is precisely what I plan to do if I get even a little bit of traction on this current design experiment. Remember that all big things start small. So thinking big requires thinking small. You either have to design something big along with a set of small steps for how to get there, or you design something small along with a process for growing it over time.
Great closing thoughts, Steven. So that will be it for this video. Let me go ahead and switch scenes. So if you are watching on Udemy, there will be some assignments for you below. For everyone else, thanks for tuning in, and see you on the next video.